Happy New Year and welcome to the Sunshine Travelers podcast. Today we're looking ahead to 2025 and sharing our travel plans for the year. We'll talk about the trips we've already booked, the destinations we're excited to explore, and a few places still on our wish list that we hope to make happen. Whether it's a long-awaited adventure, a return to a favorite spot, or a new bucket list destination, we're laying it all out and giving you a glimpse of where the Sunshine Travelers are headed next. If you're looking for inspiration to plan your own travels, this episode's for you, so let's get started. I'm Scott.
And I'm Melissa.
And we're the Sunshine Travelers. Our passion is travel and sharing our experiences with those who enjoy it as much as we do, or those who want to learn more about travel, or even those who just want to live vicariously through our travel stories. No matter where you fall along that journey, get ready to hear about our first-hand experiences as we visit some of the most interesting and amazing places on Earth. In this episode, we're sharing not only where we're planning to travel in 2025, but also the destinations we're dreaming about and hoping to make a reality. Plus, we'll be giving you some actionable tips for making your own bucket list trips happen, even if it feels out of reach for you right now. I know that we're going to be sharing more about our bucket list later in the show, but Melissa, what would you say is at the very top of your bucket list right now?
For next year or just in general?
In general.
Whew. How much time do you have? No.
So the very top.
At the very top. Like the top 10?
No, the very top.
Oh my gosh.
This should be easy because you have your bucket list written down, right?
I do, but I have so many places that are at the very top. So I would say that visiting somewhere in Asia is at the very top for me because I've never done that. It's a continent that I have not been to. And so that is at the very top. That's how I make it broad in one thing. What about you?
I think Asia is great because there's so much of Asia that I have not been to. So I think that's a good place. Really, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to try to see the Northern Lights. Like that's, high up there on the bucket list. I'm taking our own advice, though, and I'm trying not to get too excited about the possibility of seeing the Northern Lights because it's not guaranteed. But I think our trip to Iceland that we're working on, and we'll talk about in just a little bit, I think that's going to be a great trip.
Yes, and I am putting seeing the Northern Lights on the bucket list to manifest that when we're there. So, of course, as you can know, our list is long. And as we have shared before, we don't typically plan trips really far in advance, except for trips like the safari, the Galapagos, Alaska, where things really get booked up. And then, of course, Antarctica, which is where we're going on our group trip in 2026. So we're having to book that now. So if that's on your list, I want you to come with us, but you're thinking about that and you just like, I don't know how I could even make that happen, then this episode is for you. So stay tuned.
So right now for 2025, we're going to start out the travel season in March, where we're going to head to London. And this is a standard trip for us. We make this trip every year. It's a work trip for me. I have meetings that are in London every year that I need to attend. And so that's where we're going to start off 2025 with our travels.
Yes. And on the way back, though, as you know, I'm like, well, we could also do this. But Iceland is a good place to do a stopover. And so we're going to just do like a little taste of Iceland on that trip. Like we said, hope to see the Northern Lights, do a couple of tours and, like just spend a weekend, I think, just relaxing there on the way home and do that as a stopover, which, by the way, Iceland is a great way to do that if you use Icelandair. We haven't planned that part of it yet, but just know that that is something that you might want to look into if you want to add Iceland to a journey to and from Europe.
Yeah, it'll be just enough to whet our appetite for Iceland and make us want to come back and really explore more.
So then in April, we're going to head back again in that direction and visit the Netherlands. And so that's another one where it's like, okay, where else can we go? We've really, really wanted to go to a Scandinavian country. So as of right now, I'm thinking probably Copenhagen. That's somewhere that I've wanted to go and see. It's close by. So I think it'd be easy for us to get to and then just concentrate there, right? To be able to have that. We've seen a lot of things to see and do right there in Copenhagen.
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot of times. The Netherlands is going to once again be a work trip for me. And we try to just tack something on to that trip and extend that out just a little bit longer. And so we won't go and spend a whole week over there or anything like that, but we'll just add a few days on to that work trip because we've already made the journey across the Atlantic, which is the biggest part of it. And then, we'll go and see somewhere new and do something different.
Yeah. And that's really a way for us to have like a weekend, right? So then that's like almost a weekend trip that we can do tacked on and then head home.
Yeah. And it's good to try to pick locations that spending a weekend there is good enough to kind of get you a good bearing of the city or the location. And as I said, with Iceland, kind of whet your appetite and maybe feel a desire for you to come back and explore deeper.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wanted to mention too about Iceland is obviously at some point in time, we want to do the ring road and go see the whole thing and spend some time. And that's a great way to do that. Like in the summer, right? Where you have longer days and can really do the hikes. So seeing how as this will still be, more wintertime, focusing on those northern lights and just kind of picking a couple of things to do.
Yeah. So if you've done any tours of the northern lights that you just really loved in Iceland, make sure to let us know. Send us an email. You can send it to me, Scott@sunshinetravelers.com, and just tell me of any particular tours that you did that you would highly recommend.
And so then at the end of May, I'm headed to Paraguay with my sister Stephanie, who you have heard on our Alaska podcast and then on our Japan episode. She is leading a Habitat for Humanity trip, like a service trip there. So I'm going to join her on that.
Melissa, I think you're probably going to learn a lot on that trip.
So that's good. That's fine. I love to learn new skills. And so show me how to do it, teach me how to do it, and can help build a house.
Well, in September, we have planned a trip to Ireland. We're going to go to the TBEX Travel Conference, the one that we did in Puerto Rico last year. And so we're going to return to that this year. It's the TBEX Europe destination, and it's in Donegal. And that's somewhere, we've been to Ireland before, and we did most of southern portions of Ireland. We've never been into Northern Ireland. And so this is going to give us an opportunity after the TBEX conference to, go and explore a little bit more and see Northern Ireland as well.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. We just absolutely loved our time in Ireland and staying into bed and breakfast, and the people there were just amazing. The scenery is amazing. And so I'm excited to return to Ireland.
So then sometime this year, we have to make a visit to Asia for both of us. That's somewhere that you haven't been yet. You haven't been on the continent of Asia. We talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the episode. But, we have a couple of places in mind. We've tossed around a little bit about the Philippines, maybe Thailand, maybe Japan. I think we've got a lot of options that are available to us. We just haven't figured out what that is yet.
Yeah. And then we want to combine that with, again, at least a taste of Australia. I mean, of course, you could spend years, months, weeks in Australia. And so we need to get to Australia and then, of course, Asia for me, so that in February of 2026, Antarctica can be our 7th continent. So technically, I guess we could do this in early 2026, but we're definitely going to keep it open on the list for 2025.
Yeah. And I think going to maybe somewhere new like Thailand or Japan, I think those are probably really good options because, I've been to the Philippines, so that wouldn't be a new country for me. We could have also gone to India, somewhere up in northern India and into Nepal. But I think, we'll save that for another time but find somewhere there in Asia, check that continent off the list for you. Go and see and experience Australia. And then that way in February of 2026, when we get to Antarctica, you, myself, and Stephanie it's all going to be for all three of us, it will be our seventh continent. And so we can achieve that goal of hitting all 7 continents together.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this before. Scott and Stephanie have had that on there, like who's going to get there first, right? So I just like in my mind, I can all see like who's going to push each other out of the way. No, I hope not. Whereas really going to be holding hands and both taking the step while I video it or whatever.
I know what'll end up happening is Melissa will be doing her normal dragging around and I got to go to the bathroom and all these other things. And Stephanie's just going to pop right off the boat and be waving at us from the shores. And so that's what'll probably end up happening.
So speaking of course, Asia and Australia, I mean, the reason that we have it out there like that, right, is we don't know yet quite how that's going to take shape. But the big idea is that we need to hit those things. And so that gives us an opportunity. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in a second to share with you some tips and strategies about how to do this. But that gets us thinking about when we see a deal, right? Whether that ends up being like there's cruises that do those two things, or we might see flights that kind of do those two things. That's kind of like, oh, we need to do this. Then that gives us an opportunity to kind of jump on that because we know that that's kind of the goal. And so then here's some other like little things, and I'll just go through these real quick. We would also love to take the family on an Alaskan cruise. I need to pick something for my 50th birthday because you better believe I'm going to be on a trip. I'm thinking of Italy again, probably somewhere different, and then visiting Germany for a retirement for a colleague of yours. So all this sounds pretty crazy, right?
I'm sitting here thinking, I don't even know how we're going to accomplish all of this.
Yeah. So even for us, it does. But just stay with me, because if you had told me that in 2024 that we would have visited Cairo, Cape Town, Puerto Rico, in addition to places like Aruba and Curacao, I mean, the safari we had planned, right? Europe going into 2024, that we knew that we were going to do that, but I wouldn't have believed that, right? I still remember sitting in the living room, like we're trying to figure out, like once the safari was, planned and scheduled, and now we're looking at, okay, the flights, and I'm looking at Flight Connection saying, how can we get there, right? Because we had talked about Morocco, because that is still on the bucket list. That's still up there. We will get there. But that wasn't a possibility, right? To get to Kenya. And so I remember sitting in the living room and saying, hey, Scott, what about Cairo? And you jumped up and you were like, yeah, like that would be amazing to go to Egypt. So like, you never know.
Yeah. And Egypt was somewhere that, I don't know that we had that on I'm almost certain Egypt was not on our original bucket list. But we had several conversations with different people who had been to Cairo and to Luxor, and they had said, this is somewhere that you've got to put on your bucket list of things to do.
Yeah, and I think just not to mention, like if you have the opportunity to go see the Great Pyramids in Egypt for yourself with your own eyeballs, like that's just something that you don't like pass up.
Well, Melissa, don't you think we're actually covering your 50th in a lot of these other trips?
No. That would be a no. So
let me tell you how I celebrated my 50th. I went to the eye doctor. Everybody was like, oh, travel somewhere neat and far and enjoy your 50th birthday. And I did. I went 5 minutes away from the house to the eye doctor and got my new contacts.
You're 50 if. But we had done the safari for that. And in all fairness, I said, don't you want to be out of town? Don't you want to go somewhere? No, because we did do Fernandina Beach, the Dickinson Center, and then it does come, right into Christmas, which we're going to Scottsdale. But yeah, it is kind of so travel and no special trip, or at least a special destination. All right. So here's the thing. So even if we're crazy, or you have these places in your mind, or you're listening to our list and you're like, oh, it must be nice, but we really wanted to share with you 5 things that you can do to make more travel possible. Okay.
The first thing that we'd say, and I alluded to this earlier, and when I asked Melissa, I was like, but wait a minute, you have your bucket list written down. And so we would suggest that everybody take the opportunity, just pull out your phone, right? Maybe you're listening to this on your phone right now. Open up the Notes app and just title it at the top, bucket list, and just start jotting down the places that you absolutely want to go to on your bucket list. It is that simple. It doesn't have to be something formal. It doesn't have to be an app that you download, a special bucket list app. You don't have to paint a chalkboard wall in your house and, write your bucket list out there in chalk. It could just be that simple. But the one thing that you've got to do is to write it down, because what this is going to do is allow you to dream and allow you to dream big. And then when those opportunities like a great flight deal or something like that comes around, you know exactly where you want to go and you can just jump on them.
Yeah. And the power in that is having them written down, right? So that you can go look at those. And you may have even, if you don't look at it often, you may have even forgotten. When we found that picture of our bucket list on that chalkboard wall, we were like, oh, look. We were like, oh, look. Like, we checked off these things, or that was on our bucket list, which is super cool. I will say, and that the Bucket List family actually does have a little app now where you can put in your bucket list. So you can go check that out. It's kind of fun.
But you don't have to.
But you don't have to. Ours is literally on the Notes app on our phone that we did it on like a date night one night. And just, even though I think we kind of had, those other bucket lists, but just really saying, what are the places? Like, and it goes on and on and on and on, and we add to it constantly, but that's okay. Like, the power is in having it written down.
And I would say that this applies to families too. If you've got kids that are old enough to participate in coming up with this bucket list, sit down with them and involve them in that as well. There's going to be certain things that you just want to do, the two of you, and that's perfect, and highly recommend that. We've always done that, where we have certain trips that we take together, and then we had other trips that we would take with our family. But sit down with them, involve them in creating that bucket list. And they're going to throw some things out there, and one day you'll go back over that list and you'll kind of laugh. We do when we look at the chalkboard one. And it's just something, a memory that you can have as well.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I would encourage you to do, though, is dream big, right? If your goal is that you want to go to Europe, you want to go to Africa, you want to go to Antarctica, whatever it is, because if you've listened to our other episodes or where we talk about our travel history and our travel past, there were years and years and years where we went camping and we, traveled inside the United States and stuff like that. So whatever it is that you hope to do someday, dream big. Like, it is free to write that down. And there's huge power in that. When you write down your intentions, you breathe life into your dreams. And so I just wanted to read you this quote by Tony Robbins. Writing is the first step to manifesting the invisible into the visible, because then you're seeing it.
All right. So we've got our bucket list written down now. Now we need to start kind of figuring out, why are some of these places on our bucket list? And so one of the tips that you have here is to create some type of a vision board.
Yeah. So back in the day, I think a lot of us, like, we would make these, vision boards or pen, and you would like cut out from magazines and stuff like that. And now there's so many ways to do that. Let Pinterest be your vision board. Save them from Instagram. Go to Canva and, clip those images off the internet or use the pictures that they have there, and write those places down. And I would say make it super specific to this, to this next year, or if you want to, even the next 2 years, but especially maybe to this next year. So cut and paste those pictures and get very specific. Like, where is it that you want to stay? Where is it that you want to eat? What are some specific things you want to do? And even to the point where, if there's a certain season that you want to go, right? So let's just say, for example, it's Japan and you want to go during the cherry blossom season. You want to go to the Netherlands during the tulips. You want to go to Vermont or somewhere in the Northeast in the fall. Like, find pictures of that and clip those and put those on your vision board. Make that as absolutely specific and visual to what it is that you want to see and eat and experience while you are there.
And what that's going to do is that's going to get your mind dreaming big, like what Melissa was talking about, and thinking about all of the stuff that you want to do. And then it's going to motivate you to then find the way to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. When you visualize, you materialize. If you have been there in your mind, you'll go there in your body. And that's a quote from Dr. Dennis Waitley. And it's absolutely powerful. Visualization is, and being able to see what it is that you want to make happen. All right. So that's what I call the woo, right? So that is the feelings, the pictures, the writing it down. But now you do have to take action to make that happen, right? So like there are concrete things that then you have to do. So let's get into that. So number 3 then is to take action to make that happen. You cannot take a trip if you do not book that trip, right? It's like, there's a joke where it's like, I think it's like, it's about God telling somebody like, oh, or somebody praying.
Here's what it is. Tell the story.
Yeah, tell the joke. Tell the story.
All right. Yeah. So there's this guy, and every night before he goes to bed, he prays, God, just let me win the lottery. Every night, God, just let me win the lottery. And so that goes on for years and years. And so finally, he's, kneeling beside his bed one night, and he's saying this prayer. And then all of a sudden, he just hears this rumbling voice, and the walls and everything shake. And he hears this voice that says, help me out. Buy a ticket, right? So we can't win the lottery if we don't buy the ticket. And I think that's the same thing with our bucket list and our dreams, is we can't ever make it to those places on our bucket list if we don't ever buy the ticket.
Yeah. And that's how you make it happen. So there are instances where, or trips that you can book where it might be like, you can book that hotel, right? And there is like, you're not putting any money down right now, but you have that hotel booked, trips that you can take where you pay that deposit, right? And you have so many months or so many whatever to make those payments or till that final, deadline is due. And so that just gives you the motivation to say, this date is on the calendar, right? In whatever, July, let's just say, I am going to Switzerland. I have this booked. I need to be looking for these flights now. I have this cruise booked and I've put down, $200 per person or whatever it is, right? So now I have to figure out how to make it happen. But that is the key. We can wish that we can go to Europe. We can wish that we can go to Australia, Antarctica, all these places. But if we don't then say, I'm booking it. And I'll give a perfect example. Our kids, we talked about doing, couples trips, and we've encouraged our children to do that and helping with the grandchildren. And they found some really great flight deals to Portugal. That was somewhere that was on their bucket list. They've been saying ever since we were in Europe last year. And they were actually here. And I was like, you know what? Book it. You have 24 hours to cancel this flight. Book it. Like, book it right now and get that. Well, they had the hotels booked that same night, and so now they're not going to cancel it. They're going to go, but it's just taking that step to not say, oh, well, and then later on saying, I wish I would have.
So there are some tips to help people with this, right? So you mentioned book that hotel that you have seen and you want to go and stay at. But now we've got to think about, how do we get there? And then how do we pay for these things? And so there's some definite tips that people can follow to cover both of those.
Yeah. So the next thing that I would say is that subscribe to one of the FareWatch services that we have kind of been telling you about, right? So the one that we are really loving recently is Daily Drop Pro, and I'll put a link for that in the show notes. But because they do the great flight deals, all classes in that one subscription, and then also points, and they have hotel searches and stuff like that. So that's a great one. Subscribe to something like that so that you can watch where, when those bucket list places or the place where you have the hotel booked or whatever, comes across. Okay. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And then just, keep an eye out for those, but then take action on those. Like I mentioned, whenever you book a flight, no matter how that you book it, you have 24 hours, right? So you can book it. And if you just can't figure out how to make those dates happen or, get the hotel to line up or whatever, but taking that action is the first step to that. So watching those deals and then taking that action. Another piece of action that might mean opening up that credit card and start earning the points and miles to help you get going. There are lots and lots of people out there who travel for free or nearly free. Their occupations, they're, having kids and all these things, it just doesn't allow them to open up that to have the cash. And so they use these points and miles to take care of those. So we have episode 72 with Abby Heidelberg, really shows us or tells us how to travel for free or nearly free. So if you haven't listened to that, that will help you get started. So much of our travel over the years, especially flights, also hotels, even though we took that bucket list trip to Africa, there were bits and pieces of it, the safari especially, that we had to save up for. That's something that we've been married 30 years it took us that long to be able to do something like that. But flights, hotels in Cairo, we've talked about that were, that we put those two pieces together in order to be able to do that. So that might mean taking the time to learn those strategies, wisely open up those credit cards according to her advice and, others' advice that that you hear and that you read, and just letting that open up as a means to be able to pay for that, right? That's going to be investment of your time and your energy to do that, but it's going to pay dividends with the kind of travel that you can do.
And even if you can get one of them for free and pay for the other, that's 50% off right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and things like the companion certificates and stuff like that. So just learning, what works and, how you can make that happen. So instead of waiting for someday, book it and plan it, and then you'll have the motivation to figure out how to make the money to pay for that. Which brings us to prioritizing travel for that trip and for future travel in your budget. Okay. So this is really step 2 in you having to take action, right? Dreaming is one thing, but now continuing to take action on that. So this could be a lot of different things. This could be looking at your budget and saying, this is what we're going to set aside for travel, or what can we cut out, right? What is just out there that, do we have subscriptions that we're not using anymore? Things that, we used to be important to us that are just not as important to us anymore. That could be a lot of different things. So I'm not going to say, don't go get your Starbucks, don't go get your nails done, whatever, because that could be different for different people. But look at those things that for you, what is important? Could you get a used car? Could you get one that you can pay cash for so you don't have a car payment? That can just be just thinking outside of the box to what is important to me so that I can travel to some of these destinations.
When we were talking to Colin and Meg, and I don't remember what episode that was, but, one of the things they said is people ask them all the time, how do you afford to travel like this, traveling all the time? And they were like, the people who were asking me this, they had boats, they had brand new cars, they had all these things that they were making payments on. And he was like, and those things don't mean anything to us, right? Traveling, making memories with our families is a priority. So we don't put any prioritization in those things. And so when you say, how do you afford to travel like this? Well, because we're not doing these other things.
Yeah. And that's going to look different for everybody, right? So that may be important to you, and that is perfectly fine, right? But you're right. But then if you say, but I can't afford to travel, but I really want to, then we have to figure out how to make those trade-offs. So that might mean, subscribing to one of those, well, I don't say subscribing, using one of those services that then looks through your credit cards and saying, oh, well, you have 3 subscriptions to Hulu, or something like that, or physically looking through and saying, was this important? That I buy this, or do I have something that I can use, or how can I, do consignment, or just, whatever it is, so that you can budget for that and put that. And then I would say is that put that aside, right? So open up a savings account that is just for travel. Or if you've booked these trips every 2 weeks or once a month, you go and physically make that payment on that trip.
I was just going to say, stay away from my MLB subscription, though.
But we have to have the MLB subscription. But then we have to have the VPN, which I know we use the VPN for travel too. The VPN so that we can be able to watch the MLB subscription. So I get it. And I'm not saying pick the ones. But if there's ones out there that you're not using, and I'll give you a perfect example. We used to drive a ton. So like a Sirius or XM satellite radio is very important to us. But when we're not, driving so much, and now it's so easy to like listen to podcasts or, whatever on your phone, is it worth $25 a month or whatever it comes out to? And that adds up to be a lot of travel.
I think the other thing that we've looked at before as well is so many years we were wasting our points earning capabilities, right? We were paying for stuff on cards that didn't earn us any, rewards. And so think about how you're paying for different things, even just paying for your rent or your mortgage, rather than paying that directly out of your bank account. Would it be possible for you to pay that with a credit card and then pay the credit card?
Yeah.
Right. And earn points on that. And these are points that can go towards making that dream become a reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not wasting that. I mean, there is free travel out there. And so taking advantage of being able to do that. If you are going to get like a tax refund, right? If you're going to get a bonus, deciding, what are we going to do, as a couple, as a family, what are we going to do with that money? And if this trip and prioritizing that travel is important to us, like, allocating that for that. So just like getting creative to cut out, to allocate very specifically, and then also just to spend wisely. And if there's free travel out there to be had, learning about how to do that responsibly. And so then that brings us to the last thing is, your budget is stretched thin. You have all these obligations. You've cut out everywhere and you still want to travel. So what can you earn extra money doing? What side hustle can you create to be able to travel, right? And that could be a million different things depending on like your skill set, right? So can you sell travel as an agent and earn money to be able to fund your travels, right? Can you freelance some skill that you have, whether that be social media, graphic design, photography, editing, podcast editing? Could you be somebody's virtual assistant, web design? Could you help people with their books if you're an accountant? Like it could be to where you advertise to people in your community, right? Groups that you're in, but also just using Fiverr and Upwork and just doing these little jobs here and there. It could be a million different things. So just like think about like, how can I creatively, do this? Pet sitting or house sitting. We personally use rover.com or Rover, I guess I should say. They have an app too, but Rover to occasionally get people to come and, help us with the dogs. If you love taking care of pets and that's something that you can do, then do that. There's also, I don't know that this necessarily goes into the freelance. This could go to another category, but there's a site called Trusted House Sitters where you actually can go stay at people's houses, keep their houses. A lot of times I think it's associated with, keeping their pet and stay there for free, depending on, what the location is. Can you tutor? Can you coach people in something that you have done that Can you sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace or Etsy but just, like if you are passionate about travel, get passionate about how you can earn money with the skills that you have. There's probably a million different ways to be able to do that. And I would say also, like, it doesn't have to be one thing, right? I'll give you an example. I don't know if we've talked about this. I used to stage houses. I started a business where I stage houses. And in that particular business, I had all kinds of different like streams of income, right? That I would do, right? I would actually stage people's houses and then I would do model homes, but then I had a little shop like reselling the stuff. And, if people didn't want me to come physically stage, I had a little thing where they could, it was like almost like they could like a DIY type of a thing where I sold, my knowledge. So it's just like all kinds of little things that I could do. So in your area of expertise, what can you offer people and just getting creative for that and then just setting that aside for travel. But seriously, if you are passionate about travel and you're good at helping people plan trips and give people advice and want to earn some money helping people travel and plan trips, email us at info@sunshinetravelers.com and we want to talk to you.
Well, there you have 5 ways and a bunch of other ideas you can use to make more travel accessible to you in 2025 and beyond. If you'll create your bucket list and your vision board and start taking just a few of the actions, you'll be on your dream trip in no time. Do you want some accountability to make those trips happen? Email me, scott@sunshinetravelers.com, and let me know what is at the top of your bucket list and then what you're planning and manifesting for 2025. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found some inspiration to help you with your travel journeys. If you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, it would be greatly appreciated. Your 5-star reviews help us get discovered by others and possibly featured on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to our podcast to get notified of new episodes as they are released. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Sunshine Travelers Podcast. Remember, that is Travelers with 1 L. Most importantly, please share it with your friends to help them catch the travel bug. You never know, they may become your greatest travel companion.